Boy, man, bro, did a song with Lil Tim.
Some things in this game you just cannot come back from. Some moves, some words, some disrespect cuts so deep that the streets don't forget. They don't forgive, and they damn sure don't move on. And right now, in February 2026, the entire hip-hop world is watching one of the most explosive situations the culture has seen in years unfold in real time. It started with a song, a collab between Chief Keef and NBA YoungBoy that nobody saw coming. A track called Rooms that dropped like a grenade right in the middle of a block that was already bleeding. And instead of things cooling down, somebody decided to pour gasoline straight into the fire. Lul Tim, the man who shot and killed King Von outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta, hopped on camera, looked directly into the lens and told every single O Block member to sit down and shut up. Called them out by name, mocked their grief, taunted their pain, and told them they wouldn't do a single thing about it. And O Block? They did not stay quiet. What happened next broke the internet wide open, and the culture has not recovered since. To really understand why this whole situation hit the way it did, you have to go back, way back.
They was taunting him saying they killed his cousin, was insinuating Von was insinuating killed his cousin.
You know, Von and them stole all his back in the day.
Before the collabs, before the diss tracks, before the bodies and the federal indictments and the internet wars. You have to go back to a housing project on the south side of Chicago called Parkway Garden Homes. A place so dangerous, so forgotten by the rest of the world, that the people who grew up there gave it their own name. They called it O Block. And the reason they called it O Block is because in 2011, they lost a young man named O.D. Perry. And when you lose somebody that close, somebody that young, in a place that raw, you don't just mourn them, you memorialize them. You carry their name on everything you do. You put it on the block itself so the world knows somebody lived here, somebody mattered here, and somebody was taken too soon right here. That's the kind of place Chief Keef came from. That's the kind of loyalty that was built into the DNA of O Block from day one. Chief Keef, born Keith Farrell Cosard on August 15, 1995, was not just a rapper who happened to come from the South Side. He was the South Side. He was the product of everything Parkway Garden Homes produced. The hunger, the survival instinct, the raw, unfiltered energy of a kid who had seen things no teenager should ever have to see. By the time he was posting freestyles on YouTube in 2011, while sitting on house arrest for a gun charge, he wasn't just making music. He was documenting a reality that the rest of America had been turning a blind eye to for decades. The beats were dark and heavy. The bars were blunt and unpolished. The delivery was cold in a way that felt less like a performance and more like a news report from a war zone. And the world stopped and listened. What happened next was nothing short of historic. Chief Keef didn't just go viral, he changed the entire direction of hip-hop. The mixtape Back from the Dead spread through the internet like wildfire. The record I Don't Like caught the ear of Kanye West, who threw together a remix featuring Pusha T, Jadakiss, and Big Sean that landed on the Billboard Hot 100. Labels started circling, bidding wars started heating up, and by the end of 2012, a 16-year-old kid from one of Chicago's most dangerous housing projects had signed a $6 million deal with Interscope Records and launched his own imprint called Glory Boys Entertainment. His debut album, Finally Rich, dropped that same year and included features from 50 Cent and Wiz Khalifa. The single Love Sosa has since gone quintuple platinum. That is not a career. That is a phenomenon. That is a kid who built something out of absolutely nothing and dragged an entire genre of music into existence behind him. But here is where the story gets complicated. Because success at that level, that fast, with that much money involved, has a way of testing every relationship you have. And the relationships Chief Keef had back on O Block were already under serious pressure before the ink on his record deal was even dry. The block started feeling like Sosa was moving different, like the money was changing him, like the kid who used to be right there in the trenches with everybody else was slowly becoming something else, something untouchable, something distant. And whether or not that perception was fair, it was real to the people who felt it. Around 2013, the cracks started showing in a major way. The word that spread through the streets was that Lil Durk, who had come up right around the corner from O Block on Englewood's 300 block, caught a gun charge and needed $10,000 for bail. And Chief Keef allegedly did not come through. For the guys still posted up on the block, still living that life, still ducking bullets and catching cases, that was unforgivable. You don't make it out on the strength of the hood and then leave your people hanging when they need you the most. That's not how the code works. That's not what loyalty looks like. And it wasn't just Durk. Reports circulated that O Block's own Trey 5 needed around $25,000 for bond, and Keef didn't step up for that either. Piece by piece, the foundation of trust between Chief Keef and the block that made him started crumbling. And then things got even uglier. There were allegations that O Block member Boss Top ran up in Keef's crib and robbed him, hit a lick on the man who put them on the map. And on top of that, it was reported that King Von himself, the same King Von who would later become the heart and soul of O Block's identity, took 2 firearms directly from Chief Keef, just walked away with his guns. And at that point, Sosa was emotionally done. He wasn't just cooling off from the block, he was actively putting distance between himself and everything O Block represented, not out of hatred, but out of pure self-preservation. The exits happened in stages. First, when he was just 16 years old, his team moved him out of Parkway Garden Homes and into a suburban mansion in Northfield because the threats on his life were too real and too constant to ignore. Then in 2014, his cousin Blood Money was killed, and Keef has spoken publicly about how that loss changed something inside him permanently. It was the moment he started thinking about what survival actually required, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Then in 2015, the final straw arrived in the most absurd way imaginable. 20 police officers pulled up on Chief Keef with AK-47s drawn over a popped tire on a motorbike. 20 armed officers over a tire. That was it. He packed up his entire operation, loaded up his squad, and relocated to Los Angeles for good. He described the move as the best decision of his life. He called the calmer environment out west a game changer for his mental health and his creativity. And looking back at everything that happened to the people he left behind, it is genuinely hard to argue with him. Out in Los Angeles, Chief Keef built something brand new from the ground up. He went independent after Interscope dropped him in 2014. He got into art collecting. He started a label called 43B in partnership with BMG and RBC in 2022. He dropped projects on his own terms, including Almighty So 2 in 2024, which showed real artistic growth and maturity. He had 9 children. He built a life that looked nothing like the one he came from. And through all of it, he stayed away from Chicago. Not just emotionally, but physically. He hasn't been back in years. The legal heat and the genuine safety risks made it impossible. And the block that once claimed him as their own watched all of that from a distance and felt one emotion more than any other: abandonment. So when February 13th, 2026 rolled around and a track called Rooms dropped featuring Chief Keef and NBA Youngboy, produced by Mike Will Made It as part of his upcoming R3 album, O Block did not hear a song. They heard a betrayal, because Youngboy was not just another rapper to them. Youngboy had dissed King Von on wax, multiple times. Youngboy's camp had been connected to energy directly hostile to everything F and O Block stood for. To the block, NBA Youngboy was the ops. Capital O, capital P. And the man who built O Block, the man whose music gave that block its identity, had just climbed in the studio and made music with him like none of that history existed. The track pulled 1.3 million YouTube views in 4 days. It was doing numbers. And every single stream felt like another stab wound to O Block's chest. Now, to truly understand why the O Block reaction to that collab hit a level of rage that went beyond just internet anger, beyond just social media posts and emotional comments, you have to understand what November 6, 2020 did to that block. Because before that night, O Block had pain. They had resentment. They had a decade of built-up frustration toward the man who left them behind. But after that night, they had something else entirely. They had a wound that never closed, a loss so deep and so personal that it rewired the entire emotional identity of everyone connected to that block. And that wound had a name. That wound was King Von. Davon Daquan Bennett, known to the world as King Von, was not just a rapper from O Block. He was the block's second chapter. After Chief Keef packed up and moved to Los Angeles, and the drill wave he created started spreading globally, O Block needed a new voice. They needed somebody who could carry the story forward. Somebody who could put the block's reality on wax with the same raw authenticity that Sosa had brought in the beginning. And King Von was exactly that person. Born on August 9, 1994, Von grew up in the same Parkway Garden Homes environment that produced Keef. He saw the same streets, lived the same reality, buried the same homies. But where Keef's style was cold and minimal, Von was a storyteller. He could paint a picture with his bars that made you feel like you were standing right there in the scene with him. His ability to narrate real events with cinematic detail set him apart from everybody else coming out of Chicago at that time. When Von linked up with Lil Durk and signed to Only the Family, it felt like destiny. Durk had built F into one of the most respected crews in rap, and Von became the crown jewel of that operation. His mixtapes and projects gained serious traction. His album Welcome to O Block put the block's name on the map in a whole new way for a whole new generation of fans who might not have been old enough to remember the original Chief Keef era. Von was building real momentum, real industry buzz, real crossover potential. He was the proof that O Block could still produce greatness even after losing its founding father. He was the future. And then in one violent, chaotic moment outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta, that future was gone. The night of November 6, 2020 started the way a lot of nights start in that world, with tension that had been simmering under the surface for a while, finally boiling over in the wrong place at the wrong time. King Von and his crew crossed paths with Quando Rondo and his crew outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta, Georgia. The bad blood between these two camps was already documented. It was the kind of situation where everybody in that parking lot knew something could pop off. Surveillance footage captured what happened next. Von approached Quando Rondo's vehicle and threw a punch through the window, and that moment of physical contact set off a chain reaction that nobody could stop once it started. Timothy Leaks, known in the streets as Lul Tim, was 22 years old and standing right there in the middle of all of it. He was Quando Rondo's right-hand man, his day one, the person you call when everything goes sideways and you need somebody who is not going to hesitate. When the brawl erupted and Von moved on Rondo, Tim pulled his weapon and fired. Multiple shots connected. King Von was hit in the chest and the stomach. Off-duty police officers who happened to be nearby during the shooting drew their own weapons and returned fire. When the chaos finally settled, 6 people had been shot. 3 of them did not survive. King Von was 26 years old. Mark Blakely was 34. And a third individual also lost their life that night in that parking lot outside a lounge in Atlanta that most people had never heard of before and will now never forget. Tim himself caught bullets during the exchange, one in the hip, one in the backside. He was taken to the hospital, and while he was still in that hospital bed recovering from his own gunshot wounds, law enforcement came through the door and placed him under arrest on felony murder charges. 22 years old, shot twice, staring down the possibility of spending the rest of his life in a Georgia prison cell. The charges were serious. The evidence was real. The surveillance footage existed. And O Block, F, and the entire community of people who loved King Von fully expected the system to do what they believed it was supposed to do. But the system had a different answer. Timm posted a $100,000 bond in March of 2021 and walked out of custody while the case moved through the legal process. He sat under that criminal cloud for over 2 years, and then in August of 2023, Fulton County prosecutors made a decision that stopped O Block cold. They dropped every single charge against Timothy Leaks before the case ever reached a grand jury for indictment. The reason they cited was Georgia's Stand Your Ground law. The surveillance footage, the same footage that showed Von as the physical aggressor, the one who threw the first punch, the one who initiated the physical confrontation, that footage became Timm's defense. The state looked at the evidence and determined that Timm had acted to protect Quando Rondo from serious bodily harm. Self-defense. Case dismissed. Timm's attorney Noah Pines made the outcome crystal clear in his public statement. The case against his client was dismissed prior to ever being indicted. Full stop. No trial, no conviction, no consequences in the eyes of the law. For O Block and everyone who loved Von, That ruling was devastating in a way that went beyond legal disappointment. This was not just a case that got thrown out. This was the man who ended their brother's life walking out of the legal system completely free, while Von's mother still woke up every morning without her son. While his daughter grew up without her father. While the block carried his name on their backs every single day, knowing the person responsible was out here living his life without a single charge hanging over him. That kind of outcome does not produce acceptance. It produces rage, and it produces the specific kind of helpless, boiling fury that has nowhere legal to go. And Timm did not help matters by staying quiet. After those charges were dropped, he started showing up in interviews talking about the night of the shooting with a casualness that made O-Block's blood pressure spike every single time a clip surfaced. He talked about getting shot like it was just another Tuesday. He spoke about the events of that night with zero remorse, zero weight, zero acknowledgement of the magnitude of what had been lost on the other side of that exchange. He linked with figures like Charleston White, who went on camera and called King Von a demon and praised him openly for what he did. And every single one of those moments was a fresh cut on a wound that O-Block was already struggling to keep from killing them. So by the time Chief Keef dropped Rooms with NBA Youngboy on February 13th, 2026, the emotional temperature inside O-Block was already at a breaking point. The grief was still raw. The anger at Timm was still volcanic. The resentment toward Keef for years of perceived abandonment was already simmering. And now the man who founded their block had just put out music with somebody they considered a direct enemy. Somebody whose camp had disrespected Von on record, on camera, and in real life. Every single pressure point got hit at the exact same time. And 3 days later, when Timm hopped on camera to respond to the chaos surrounding that collab, he did not try to calm anything down. He walked straight into the fire and threw his own match in behind him. February 16th, 2026. 3 days after Rooms dropped and set the internet on fire. 3 days after O-Block had been going crazy on every platform, posting their frustration, calling Keef a traitor, mourning Von all over again through the lens of what felt like the ultimate betrayal. 3 days of non-stop online warfare between two sides that had been carrying real pain for years. And right in the middle of all of that raw, unfiltered emotion, DJ Academics dropped a clip on his Instagram that stopped the entire culture dead in its tracks. The video was short, maybe 30 seconds. But those 30 seconds did more damage than any diss track, any subliminal bar, or any social media post ever could have done. Because it was Lul Tim, looking directly into the camera, addressing O-Block by name, and saying exactly what he wanted to say with zero hesitation and zero apology. He was not being subtle. He was not being indirect. He was not hiding behind metaphors or clever wordplay. He looked straight into that lens and told every single member of O-Block to shut up and sit down. He called them out. He mocked their grief. He stood on the fact that he was free, that the charges were gone, that the legal system had looked at everything and sent him home. And he threw all of that directly in their faces with the kind of confidence that only comes from a man who genuinely believes he is untouchable. And in that moment, whether you loved him or hated him, whether you stood with O-Block or thought the whole situation was a street politics mess that nobody should be glorifying, you had to acknowledge one thing. Timm knew exactly what he was doing. Every single word was calculated. Every second of that video was intentional. This was not a man who slipped up and said something reckless. This was a man who made a deliberate choice to poke the bear as hard as he possibly could. And then he said 3 words that hit harder than anything else in that clip. Get some money, 3 words. And the entire culture immediately understood what those 3 words meant because the context sitting underneath them was impossible to miss. Because while Timm was out here free and clear, posting videos and taunting people on the internet, Lil Durk, the head of Only the Family, the man who became O-Block's lifeline after Chief Keef left, the so-called voice of the streets, was sitting in federal custody. The feds had picked him up near Miami in October of 2024 on murder-for-hire conspiracy charges. The allegation was that Durk had orchestrated a hit on Quando Rondo to avenge King Von's death. But the shooters allegedly got the wrong person. Instead of Rondo, they killed his cousin Xavier Robinson at a gas station in Los Angeles in August of 2022. An innocent man connected to the situation by nothing more than blood relation paid the ultimate price. And it was not just Durk who got swept up. 5 of his F affiliates went down with him. Calvin London Grant, DeAndre Dantrell Wilson, Keith Jones, David Bryan Lindsay, and Asa Houston all caught federal charges, including conspiracy to commit murder for hire and serious weapons offenses. The government was not treating this like a street beef that got out of hand. They were treating only the family like a criminal organization and building a case designed to dismantle it from the top down. Evidence presented included F credit cards allegedly being used to purchase flights for shooters traveling across state lines. Durk was not looking at years. He was looking at the rest of his life behind federal walls. So when Timm said get some money, what he was really saying was, your boss is in a cage. Your crew is catching federal cases. Your whole operation is being picked apart by the government piece by piece. And you are on the internet crying about a song that dropped on a Friday. That is what those 3 words carried. And that jab landed flush on everyone who heard it. The response from O-Block and their supporters was immediate, and it was volcanic. YouTube channels documented members breaking their silence, going on record, threatening real consequences. Diss tracks were being cooked up in real time across the city. The energy shifted from hurt and emotional to something much darker and much more focused. On X, the discourse split the culture straight down the middle. One viral post read, "First O-Block disowns Chief Keef. Now they are mad because he is making music with the hottest rapper out right now." And honestly, that perspective resonated with a massive portion of the hip-hop community, because the logical contradiction at the heart of O-Block's position was impossible to ignore once somebody said it out loud. You cannot kick a man out of the family, rob his house, take his guns, leave him hanging when he needs bond money, and then turn around years later and tell him who he is allowed to do business with. That is not loyalty. That is entitlement wearing loyalty's clothes. Comment sections across every platform were flooded with people pointing out that same hypocrisy. People writing that Chief Keef understands it is business, and that is why he is free and still alive. People noting that the loudest voices screaming about loyalty were the same ones who violated Keef's home and never once held him down when it actually mattered. Hot New Hip Hop covered the entire discourse and noted that despite all the explosive rhetoric and the threats being thrown around on social media, no confirmed physical escalations had taken place at that point. It was all internet warfare. But internet warfare in the drill world has a history of turning into something real, and everybody watching knew that the line between online and offline in this culture has always been dangerously thin. What this entire situation ripped open for the world to see was the fundamental contradiction that sits at the center of street loyalty in hip-hop. Chief Keef left O-Block over a decade ago. He watched from 3,000 miles away while people from that same block robbed his home, while Von took his guns, while the politics of a world he was trying to escape kept threatening to pull him back under. He built something new. He survived. He made it out in the most literal sense of that phrase. And now, because he got on a record with somebody the block considers an enemy, the same people who pushed him away want to hold him accountable to a code he has not lived under in 10 years. The same code that has Durk facing life in federal prison, the same code that got Von killed at 26 years old, the same code that has 5 more men staring down federal indictments. The codes are not protecting anybody. They are not building anything. They are just producing funerals and prison numbers and social media wars that never actually end. And Timm sits right in the middle of all of it, free, unbothered, posting videos and daring people to respond. Whether you see him as someone who protected his friend in a moment of chaos, or as someone who has been rubbing salt in an open wound ever since those charges got dropped, his presence in this story is undeniable. He is the living, breathing reminder of everything O-Block lost and everything they cannot get back, no matter how many diss tracks they drop or how many times they post on the internet. And as long as he keeps talking, and as long as the federal cases keep moving forward, and as long as Chief Keef keeps building his life on his own terms, 3,000 miles away from all of it, this story is not going anywhere. The wound is still open, the fire is still burning, and in the drill world, it always finds a new beat to come alive on. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, you already know this story is bigger than a song. This is about loyalty and what it actually costs. This is about survival and what you have to leave behind to get there. This is about a block that built one of the most influential sounds in the history of American music, and everything that block has had to endure since the moment the world started paying attention. Chief Keef is still out here building. Lul Tim is still out here talking. Lil Durk is sitting in federal custody, waiting to find out if he ever walks free again. And O-Block is still standing, still grieving, still carrying King Von's name like the weight of the world. None of this is over, not even close. So if you want to stay locked in on everything that develops as this situation continues to unfold, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss an update. Drop your thoughts in the comments below because this one has the culture divided and we want to hear exactly where you stand. Share this video with somebody who needs the full story, and we will see you on the next one.